Every spring, people wait until typically April or even May to get started on their landscaping projects. So today I want to talk about a few things that you can do to get started on your project early, to get a running start early, so you are not behind once the weather starts to warm up. So this is a live stream. If you are here watching live, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please say hello. I'm going to make sure we're live on Instagram. Here we go. Hello, Instagram. Also, welcome. Today we're going to talk about just the fact that in the spring, just about every spring, people wait until April, May to get started on their landscaping and their gardening projects. And I want to share a few things that you can do right now to get started early if you have some big dreams for your landscaping project this year. Hello from Northern California. Oh, thank you so much for being here. So this is a live stream. This is a Q&A as well. And if you're watching the replay too, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to share things in the comments, even if you're not here live, even if you're watching the replay. Super excited to have you all here today. So Barbie, I would love to hear a little bit about your project, what you're working on this spring, or what you're dreaming up this spring. If you have any ideas for your garden this year, be happy to help out. Or if you have any questions in particular, this is just some time for us to hang out and talk about gardening. So in the meantime, also, if you can, if you're here watching from Instagram too, if you can hear me and see me okay, please drop something in the comments as well. I see, let's see, we got all my settings are looking good to go. So I think I am live. I love this multi-streaming software. So I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram simultaneously. So first thing I want to talk about, preparing for your spring project. There's the common thing that happens for people. I'm a landscape designer. I teach gardening and landscape design. I help people with their garden projects. I'm not offering in-person landscape design services right now. I'm actually doing everything online through Zoom, through courses, through what you're watching right now. But just the years of me offering, 7 years of me offering landscape design services in person, what would happen is March, mid-March, and especially like after April 1st, suddenly I would get about I'd say 3/4 of the inquiries for help with a landscape project, for help with a landscape design. Everybody will approach me starting in April. And at that point, I'm usually already booked out a few months. And at that point too, it's also a little bit, like it's time in many climates in April, it's time to get started on your project at that point. So reaching out to a landscape designer, right at that time, it's a little bit too late. So now that it's February, and I know most of the U.S. is dealing with insanely cold weather. We've got snow on the ground, everything's frozen solid, but now is the time to start planning things out. Some specifics you can start doing right away, clarifying your goals. What are your dreams for your space? Maybe you're just taking on a very small project this spring, getting really clear on what those goals are specifically, even for a tiny project. What's the scope of what you're going to be working on, and what's going to be most important to you this spring. Get really clear on that right now. Again, this is something that a lot of times folks will, in April or May, they'll start figuring out, and then it's a little bit too late to take action sometimes, depending on where you live. Here in the Pacific Northwest, by mid-May, June, we're starting to experience our summer drought is moving earlier and earlier. So by June, it can almost be a little bit late to be planting things, because we're going to start to see more, we're not getting as much rain. We're going to start experiencing some of the summer temperatures. That's been getting a little bit, it's been moving up closer and closer every year. So really clear goals, collecting inspiration if you want, if you have a vision in particular for a garden bed, what you want to create. Ooh, I see, Barbara, you've got some more thoughts in the chat here. Oh, you say that you are working on a refresh. You have established landscapes. It feels a bit tired. So you just got out in the garden today and pruned. You're looking for water-wise and native plants. Awesome. Let's see. I got some more thoughts here. Soil seems tired, so you're starting to amend things, piling up raked leaves around the bases of plants. That's a fantastic strategy. Yeah, a lot of that's the next thing on my list, actually, is a lot of soil prep does happen well in advance. And there actually are things that you can start doing once the snow melts, but even if the ground is freezing, it's frozen or it's freezing and thawing, that can be a great time to start applying mulch. You can start a compost in place method. So here on my YouTube channel, I've got a series of videos where I talk about different mulch best practices. There's one in particular where I talk about sheet mulching, and there are some myths associated with sheet mulching, some common mistakes too. So those resources, if you want to sheet mulch, it's my personal favorite way of creating a new garden bed. It's a great way to smother out weeds, lawn, without having to dig all of that out. It kind of composts the lawn and the weeds, and that just becomes more organic matter for your soil. Sheet mulching is something you need to start doing months in advance of planting. And that's so if you have an idea of where you'd like a garden bed to be, that'd be a great resource to check out on YouTube. Again, if you check out the mulch playlist, it's going to be one of those videos in particular. I'm drawing a blank on the name of that. I think it's how to create a garden bed from scratch. I think that's it. If there's a picture of lasagna in the thumbnail, that's the video to watch, because I do talk about lasagna gardening in that video too, which is basically a more advanced sheet mulching method where you add even more materials. So yeah, probably what you're saying, working on piling leaves up around the bases of plants, those leaves are going to be decomposing in place. I would say too, depending on your soil, it is possible that you might not need to do as much as you think. It could be all about plant selection, what you plan on growing specifically in that space. Some plants, what I recommend as much as possible is selecting plants that are happy to grow with the soil you already have. Sometimes I add a little bit of compost in addition to that to give things a little extra boost. Mulching, if you mulch with arborist chips, they're going to be decomposing, adding compost to your soil. You are absolutely on the right track with that. So yeah, if you're looking for additional resources on that mulch playlist would be a great place to start. I also recommend mulching. So I see we've got more folks joining in from Instagram as well. If you got any questions, please shout them out in the chat. That's mulching. Another thing that's important about mulching is it's good to do that before the weeds really get rolling. If you have a few weeds coming up, that's okay, but we should be doing this ideally now before the weather starts to turn. I find I start to get a lot of the bitter cress that makes about 1 billion, they make about 1 billion weed seeds every year, and they come up everywhere. That's one that starts to come up even in late February. So it is good if you plan on mulching your garden beds to decrease weeds, getting a running start on that, doing that before things start to warm up, before the day length starts to increase too much. It's going to give you a running start for sure. Ooh, we got compost pile. You feel like you add it too much, and then you have kind of rough stuff. Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I think there could be a series of things that are. Tell me more about what you mean by rough stuff. Is it like you have really large material, like an abundance of things that just aren't decomposing, like you have lots of woody debris and such in that pile? Or is it like the things that you're adding to the pile are kind of hanging out there? So if you want to hear something really nerdy, I was the intern for my local Master Composter Recycler program for about a year. So I could talk compost all day, for sure. That's one of my favorites. And so for any of those of you who are joining in, I see some folks on Instagram too. Please drop any questions, garden questions, landscape design questions you have in the comments. We're talking about getting a running start on spring because so many people will wait until the last minute to start their projects, and then it's a little bit too late. So we talked about the importance of clarify your goals now, start collecting inspiration now. So we talked about soil prep, mulching, and another thing that you should do, I'm looking down here at my notes too, so keeping me on track. Another thing you should do is a resource inventory. This is one that I think fewer people think about when you're thinking about planning your garden project, but time and time again in the spring, you look through your garage. Time and time again, people will rush to the garden center to get the things that they need for a project. But if you look through your garage, see what you have on hand already. See what materials you have on site that could be useful for any projects you have coming up. You'd be surprised, let's say you have a vision for a garden bed. And you're thinking, I'll put this piece of art in the center as a centerpiece, and I want to add this to edge it. Or you'd be surprised what you might be able to scrounge from your yard already. And this is an exercise I do with my clients, with my students. I have a checklist about 1 mile long of things that you can look for that could be helpful for a landscaping or garden project. Really unexpected resources are just woody debris. If you have logs, limbs, some of those things can be upcycled to bricks, pavers. Sometimes we have those things that are in a pile kind of behind the garage that can be really useful. So let's jump back in the chat here. So I asked Barbie about just any garden landscape design questions. We're talking about compost right now. So materials larger than, and you want to use it sooner. So you use green stuff and shredded paper. I'm glad to hear you love compost too. Yes, you're in good company. So you did down under and you get to the older stuff, but you're not sure how long should it rot down. Oh, great question. So if you would like compost quickly, it's recommended that you compost material that are like the diameter of, so again, I mentioned I was an intern for Master Compost Recycler program, so I'm going to be sharing some of those rules. They say anything smaller in diameter than your thumb, that's a good thing to add to a really quick compost pile if you're hoping for that end product as soon as possible. Things that are a little bit smaller, so branches, woody material that's a little smaller than a thumb in diameter is what's typically recommended. Of course, that's a little subjective, right? But that gives you a general idea. If you have a lot of longer branches, chopping things up a little bit shorter, it's all about surface area. But if you have a lot of woody debris that's not decomposing, there's a few things you should check for. First is moisture. Compost pile should be the dampness of a wrung out sponge, so you don't want it to be soggy. If it's soggy, that's going to slow down decomposition a bit. But if it's too dry, that's going to slow it down. The next thing you can do is add air to the compost pile. So just turning your compost pile, your bin, rotating as much of the material as you can get to with a pitchfork, just kind of fluffing it all up. It's going to add oxygen. It's going to increase it's going to give more energy to all of the little creepy crawlies and heebie-jeebies that are in that compost bin doing the decomposition. Air is really important. Moisture is really important. The other thing is having a good balance of materials in there. So you mentioned that you use green stuff and shredded paper. I've got a resource on this. Let me see if I can find. Oh yeah, I do know where to find that. Drum roll, everybody. I've got a resource that talks about how to get the right ratio of materials in your compost pile. Let me grab a link for that. And there are two main categories of materials that you add. Anything you add to a compost pile, we kind of group that into two main categories of material. Got it. Okay, I found the page. Now I need to just grab the link. Ooh, it looks like the formatting of my page is a little bit weird, but y'all get the idea here. Let me move that over to the comments. Here we go. So I'm dropping this on YouTube. So anybody who's watching from Instagram, let me see if I can drop that in the chat as well. Here we go. Greens versus browns. This should, assuming, I haven't used this page in a minute, assuming all systems are a go. If somebody's willing to try it out, tell me if they get a follow-up email from me, or if you don't, I'll share an updated link in the description, once the replay goes up on YouTube. So I'll be doing a test of my own too. But if you don't get that, let me know. You should get a follow-up email with a handout that'll talk about the greens versus browns. So greens are really high in nitrogen. They're compost materials that are high in nitrogen. And then browns are things that are higher in carbon. And what's interesting is some materials it's kind of unexpected. Like coffee grounds, for example, are considered a green, even though they are technically a brown material. They're considered a green because they're really high in nitrogen. Manure is considered a green. It's really high in nitrogen. So it's to get just the best decomposition in your compost pile. So it breaks down into usable compost as soon as possible. The rule of thumb is just 50-50. So if you have a lot of brown woody material, like you're saying, is just kind of sitting there, not decomposing, adding more green material, more nitrogen-rich material to that pile is going to help speed up the decomposition. And so that could be reaching out to local farmers. In my area, there's something called a manure exchange program. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but if you get a bucket of, chicken poop or something like that and add that to your compost bin, turn that around, that's going to really heat things up. Grass clippings can also be really helpful too. Of course, this time of year, it's a little bit harder to get access to those nitrogen-rich materials, but food scraps, you could reach out to local restaurants for waste. And if there's any juice bars in your area, local coffee shops, you can get coffee grounds from them. So it would be a little bit of a hobby, right? Scrounging some of these materials if you want to get your compost pile in your backyard breaking down a little bit quicker. These are some things that you can do. So you ask how often to turn it. Is it dependent on weather or moisture? What I remember us teaching was every 3 days, about give or take, is kind of the maximum you could turn your compost pile. I believe it was every 3 days. I don't think it was every day. I should know this off the top of my head, but most people don't even turn it that often. If you do it once a week, the more you do it, right, the more oxygen you're going to be adding to your pile. I think about every 3 days was that sweet spot where you're giving things enough time to settle and let all those decomposers do their work. And then I think most people, I'm a lazy composter, so I tend to just kind of bury any food scraps or things like that into the compost pile or into my compost bin. And then I let it just do its thing over time. But the more you turn it, the quicker it's going to decompose. So, and then is it dependent on weather and moisture, how often you turn it? No. And it can help if your compost pile is a little bit too damp. I mentioned that you want it to be the dampness of a wrung out sponge. If it's a little bit too wet and soggy, then you're going to want to maybe turn, like usually the bottom of the pile is going to be, or the bottom of your compost bin is going to be a little bit soggier than the rest. Then of course turning it can help some of that dry out, but kind of the aeration of a compost pile, that's kind of a separate thing. If it's drying out, add a little bit of moisture. And awesome, I see that thumbs up. And yeah, that's a good reminder. Anybody who's watching this, if this is helping you out, if you don't mind giving this video a like, it actually really helps the YouTube, all the algorithms and the forces that be to recommend this live stream or this content to other people. That really helps out. Great. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions too. So those are the 3 main things in review. If you want to speed up the decomposition of your compost pile, turning it, add some oxygen to the pile, moisture, making sure it's not too wet, not too dry, dampness of a wrung out sponge. And then I've got this resource here. It talks about greens versus browns. You want to get about a 50-50 balance. And this handout in particular, I shared that link to that. And this is a free PDF resource that I actually go into detail. There's a ratio if you want to get really detailed and how, like the volume, the quantities of what particular ingredients, because of course not all ingredients have the same amount of, compostable materials have the same amount of nitrogen or the same amount of carbon. And then surface area is a thing too. So there's these ratios that the really die-hard composters have put together, so you can think about how much, if you're adding 1 bucket full of this ingredient, 1 bucket full of that ingredient, you can calculate out where you are in that ratio, if you need to balance those numbers out by adding maybe a little extra of the nitrogen-rich material and so on. I never really take my compost pile this far. I usually just get a feel for, I'll turn it every now and then whenever I feel like it, and then I'll be burying the nitrogen-rich materials, and I'll always have probably more browns than greens. And then, of course, the bottom of the pile is going to have the most fully decomposed materials. So as you turn it, of course, you're going to mix all of that up. So once you're ready to really wait to finish, let that pile finish off, a lot of times people start a new pile and then start putting all the new materials in there. Start with a pile of browns, start adding those the greens to that second pile, let that pile sit, and again, every 3 days, once a week, something like that, give that a turn, and that will help things out. So anybody else have any gardening questions, drop them in the chat. I've got just a few more things I'd love to share about just how to get a head start on spring. And I love that Barbara, you're thinking ahead, you're preparing some compost to maybe use in some other projects later on as you're improving your soil. That's fantastic. And the compost in place methods too might be worth looking into for you if you are creating new garden beds in a new spot. I also like to share in the spring, about now is when you may consider, if you want to grow some of your own plants for a new garden bed, you want to start some perennials from seed, you want to take some cuttings and propagate things. A lot of things are going to be calculated based on your last frost date, and that's something you can look up, type in your zip code. There are tons of resources like Almanac resources that will help you determine what your last frost date is in your area. So that's a good one to figure out. You can calculate backwards how many weeks from that last frost date when you should be starting seeds. Cuttings, get a head start on cuttings early. Of course, the best timing can depend on whatever species you're trying to propagate. But I am still taking hardwood cuttings this time of year, especially in the Pacific Northwest. It's a little bit milder. But even, on a cold day, I have taken hardwood cuttings. And I can have things rooting by spring pretty easily. So getting a head start on propagating things. Nurseries get super busy in the spring too. So if you have a project in mind, start planning. Start planning now, because now the inventory is going to increase at your local nursery as you get closer to spring. But most nurseries are really gearing up. If you'd like a little bit of extra help, you have a plant list, you want them to maybe order some things for you, get a head start. As soon as you can, I'd say February into early March, and then at that point, things are already going to be starting to pick up for those nurseries. Wait lists, that's something I want to talk about in particular today. Because I mentioned at the start, I work as a landscape designer. In the spring, it just gets crazy. Anybody who does good work, a good landscape designer, good contractors who are going to be installing whatever you're hoping to build this spring, they are going to be really busy starting in later March into April and into May. Reach out to them now, get some bids now, just get on their radar now. Some of them will already have wait lists forming. So if you are interested in doing a project this spring, I hope this one piece of advice, find those good people now, get on their wait lists right now, or start working with them early because they're probably already scheduling out into spring. And I like to remind people that the people who do good work, they tend to be very busy in the spring. So a head start, and then also if you do reach out, if you're watching this replay and it's April or May, if communication is a little bit slow, it's probably why. Everything happens all at once this time of year. So if you're hiring local help, don't wait to get on that wait list. And I also want, if you are hoping to, I don't know, if you want to install a pond, if you have an idea for a patio that you want to make out of pavers, you can start watching sources like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and so on, OfferUp. A lot of those you can create search alerts to be watching for materials. Get a head start now. If there's anything you're hoping to scrounge for or thrift, start looking now because, again, everybody all at once wants to do these projects in the spring. This can get you a little bit of a running start on some of those terms. So let me check on the chat here. Awesome, you grabbed that handout. What about covering the pile? I have a tarp over it to help keep the moisture and the sides are open. I love the bottom of the pile. You sift out all the good compost from the bottom of the pile. Yeah, you are right on it with your composting strategy. It sounds like you're using it like right as that compost is getting ready to go. That's fantastic. So having a tarp over the pile is great because you can kind of control the moisture a little bit more. If it feels a little bit dry, of course, you can pull that tarp off, let the rain water that compost pile. But that in general, that can be a good thing. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I have covered compost piles all the time. You know, we get a lot of rain. I think a lot of these materials do tend to drain pretty well. If you're going through a period of just really heavy rain, some stormy weather, then of course, tarping it can be a little bit more important. I think the being overly soggy tends to be more of an issue in a compost bin. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, you were on the right track with the tarp over the pile and the sides open. Kind of keep them as long as you have that. It's kind of the moisture level, something like a wrung out sponge. If you squeeze it and like a ton of water just kind of runs out of that compost material, then it's going to be a little bit too soggy. Then your compost bin can start to smell. So if your compost bin smells, compost bins should not smell, even if you're putting food scraps in it. I almost never smell a compost pile, and if it is smelling, it means something's wrong. It could be you have too much. Probably you have too much nitrogen-rich material in there, not enough carbon-rich material, and again, that handout can help with that. Or it's a little bit too soggy. So you should never smell your compost pile. These are kind of like my main points, things to consider as you're planning things in the spring. I want to share too, I've got a wait list coming up this spring. It's gardenprojectacademy.com/waitlist. Let me grab that link. Yeah, I closed off that link when I pulled up the greens and browns here. Let me grab that. Perfect. I'm putting this in the YouTube chat. So if you are interested in help with landscape design, help with your project this spring, be sure to get on that wait list. Secure your spot. It's kind of like getting in line, so you can get a little bit of extra help right from the start. So I'm going to be doing a cohort of landscape design work, helping people through. So I like to teach people how to create their own landscape designs. But if you want extra help from me, then this is the best time to get help. So starting early March, I'm going to be launching my first cohort of landscape design help this spring. So like kind of guidance step by step through the process. And this is again all online live coaching. So that's what this waitlist is all about. If you're interested in getting some help, if you have some more one-on-one questions too, it's a great place to get started. And I'll be following up with anybody who signs up. I'll follow up. But I just want to start. I'm starting this process now, the waitlist process now, because spring gets to be so busy. So if you're here and watching and you're interested in this, be sure to jump on that. So just a review of the things we talked about. Please don't wait until April, May to start reaching out to, if you're hiring local help, get on their wait lists, start getting bids from people. It's a good time to start thinking about what you want to grow, what your goals are, start propagating things early, start watching for materials, and also just clarifying, getting a really good idea of what you want to do. Just the planning process should start now. Planning an entire landscape design, it takes, I recommend for most people, if you're creating a landscape design for your whole yard, 6 weeks. It's kind of the minimum, assuming you have like a job and other responsibilities. Plan about weeks to be able to clarify that end vision, break things down into phases of installation, and start preparing for that first phase of installation. You're going to want to start a few weeks in advance. So thank you all so much. If you're interested in some help this spring, join on that waitlist. And then I've also in the chat, we've got that greens versus browns if you'd like some extra help. Barbie, thank you so much for being here and for your questions. I actually would love, if you want to follow up with me, I'd like to hear how your I know this sounds like compost is not the most thrilling thing for everyone, but I would love to hear if some of these tips are helping you. And I'd love to hear more about your yards too. Anybody who's watching the replay, got any questions, don't hesitate to share them in the comments below this video. See you all next time.